Hello everyone, I'm Brian and welcome back. Let's go ahead and continue.
So we tend to measure what we value, and you were talking about standardized tests, but so much of teaching and learning is about relationships that imply intimacy and caring and witnessing and seeing one another with a teacher. And I know you have a story about the teacher or the doctor who noticed that the little girl who was fidgeting was actually a dancer.
Yeah.
So is it about training the teachers, or is it supporting the teachers in a different way? How do we create inspiring teachers or give them the room to help foster all the different types of intelligence that you both have been speaking about?
Well, there are there are several strands to education, obviously. One of them is the curriculum. I'm talking about organized education. I mean, people learn on their own and can learn informally, but if we're talking about organized education, as in the schools that Sadhguru is describing or the schools you've been involved in, there's always a curriculum, which is what we want people to learn. So a big part of this argument is we need a different sort of curriculum. At the moment, in America, for example, we have a very narrow curriculum that's based primarily on a fairly impoverished view of science, technology, and math. I say impoverished because math can be a fantastically invigorating and interesting discipline. Years ago, I asked a professor of pure mathematics with the university I worked at how you would assess a PhD in pure mathematics. His intelligence had gone at this point, obviously.
Only 70%.
Only 70%. But with a small shard of it that was left. I said to him, how would you assess a PhD in pure math? Actually, first I said to him, how long is a PhD in pure math? Because I'd never seen one. And he said he'd seen one recently that was 20 pages long. Like 20 pages of math. Page after page of math with equals at the end. And I imagine I've never seen one. So I said, well, how would you judge one? Presumed it's right. You'd be annoyed, wouldn't you? Spend 5 years doing a PhD in pure math, comes back wrong. See me. And he said, no, they're normally right. I said, well, how would you judge one? And he said there are two criteria. There's originality. In other words, it's how creative it is. I'd like to talk a bit more about creativity in a bit, but it's about whether it breaks new ground. But the second I loved, he said it's aesthetic. I said, why does that matter? He said, because mathematicians believe that mathematics is the purest way we have of describing some of the truths of nature. And since nature is inherently beautiful, the more elegant the proof, the more likely it is to be true.
Dang.
He could be talking about a sonata or a dance or a poem. And of course, mathematicians do feel that way. To a mathematician...
Sorry, real quick. If it's very elegant, it's more than likely to be true. That is so weird. For me, what does elegance have anything to do with something being true or not?
Mathematics is a beautiful abstract language like poetry. And the problem people have is they don't speak math. If you don't read music, if you look at a page of notation, what you see is a visual puzzle. If you read music, you don't see a puzzle, you hear a symphony. And it's the same with mathematics, that mathematicians who speak math see a symphony. They don't see a puzzle. And so a lot of the problem in mathematics is it's a literacy problem. We have phrasebook math. It's like trying to court somebody with phrasebook French. It's just not a very good idea. Take my word for that. It doesn't work out. So part of it is that we have a limited conception of these disciplines, a fairly impoverished view. And what I'm arguing for, and it's implicit, I think, in what I understand from what I've read about Sadhguru's schools and what he's been telling us, is you need a broad curriculum that recognizes that education has a whole range of functions and that we have to address physical development, spiritual development, our emotional development, and all of that is tied up with a bigger view of consciousness. And therefore you need a school curriculum which has the arts, the humanities, the sciences, technology, not incidentally, not in a hierarchy, but equally and co-equally important. It's important for every reason, and also because for some kids that's where their real lives are going to lie. That's where they will discover themselves most fully. The second part of education is pedagogy, which is how we aim to teach people these things. And I think you're right. I mean, pedagogy, teaching, is the most important part of it. I mean, the reason Sadhguru is having the effect he's having on the world is because he's such a brilliant teacher. Teaching is what this is about. And teaching is not something that can be reduced to direct instruction. Teaching is not about telling people what to think. It's facilitating knowing. It's creating conditions where people will come to understand for themselves by probing them, questioning them, raising their curiosity, probing them so they might go in a different direction, giving them some tools, some techniques.
I do wonder though, is there like a certain criteria minimum that's needed? So what I mean basically is like basic reading and math. Should that be something that's in a sense mandatory? It seems like that's kind of needed. You should be able to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Now exponents, square roots, logarithms, sines, cosine, tangent, and all that. That's a little bit specialized. And just getting the basic understanding, because you don't want to, it would be kind of weird to go in a store to buy something and you don't know how to subtract what money you don't know how much money that you need because you don't understand numbers. This kind of brings back when I was younger. My dad would tell me how much I need or count out the money that he's going to give to me, and I had to do the math. Then I was maybe 4, 5, or 6 at the time. It was very difficult. I didn't quite. I had some understanding, but I do remember that moment. And we got the money anyway. But still, it was interesting that you don't quite fully grasp numbers. I was very young. That's understandable. But then to have that when someone's teenager or an adult to not to understand or grasp money, there are some people out there who are kind of like that, and it's very strange that they're not taught that way, but it's because education wasn't accessible to them. But now with education, what they're talking about, they don't have any hard say this is what's needed or not, but to maybe if it's too free, that maybe some people would grow up not knowing basic math or basic handwriting or basic English or whatever the language happened to be. Actually, I guess should there be? I guess it's a question. Should there be certain basic understandings that needs to be taught? Handwriting, the language, and basic math, so that you know how to write a sentence, you know how to add and subtract, and know how to speak properly. I assume that's my assumption, to have at least those base 3, and then free from there on. Which hopefully doesn't take too much time, but I don't know. But it's probably something that has to be continually taught throughout the entire education system, just some basic stuff so that they don't forget it, because there's a saying that if you don't use it, you lose it, which I do believe to be true.
And to reduce it to a process of delivering information to people. I really don't like this language that's got into education of delivering the curriculum. It's like education, some branch of FedEx. It's not. Great teachers know that instruction may be part of it, but the larger part of it is enabling, facilitating, piquing people's curiosity, engaging them, and inspiring their imaginations and seeing the possibility in something. It's a very sophisticated process, and one of the reasons that our education systems stumble is precisely because we've demeaned the profession of teaching. We haven't respected it in the way that we should. We don't compensate people in the way they need to be in order to concentrate on the job and do it properly. And and the best teachers aren't necessarily the ones with the most degrees. On the contrary, I mean, I know all kinds of very smart people with degrees who can't teach at all.
Yeah.
And it's the big mistake that we've...
Sorry. Yeah, he's very right there. There are people out there who can learn and absorb things, but that doesn't mean they know how to teach it or regurgitate that. Spit that back out, basically. I can't say the word for some odd reason. Struggling with English at the moment. But yeah, some people can absorb things like sponge, but yet they cannot basically spit that back out for other people to absorb. There are people who struggle learning but are fantastic speakers, and what they do know, they can speak out very clearly.
And the third bit of education is assessment. Well, assessment is important. I can't think of any education process that doesn't benefit by people making assessments of it. But assessment's not testing. Assessment is about making judgments of what's going on and whether it's worthwhile or it isn't, and how people are progressing. All great teachers do that. They're sensing whether this is happening or not. And you don't have to give people numbers for that. And what's happened, I think, in America is that we've ended up with a very narrow curriculum, which has been compressed because there was a piece of legislation passed here, was it 20 years ago now, almost, called No Child Left Behind, which is one of the great pieces of modern irony. And what happened was that the government decided that America was falling behind in the international race in education, and the country had to compete, and the children were the foot soldiers in doing this, and that the way standards were to be raised was through standardized testing. It's a terrible mistake to confuse standardization with raising standards, I think. But then what happened was they released this opportunity to the publishing companies. I looked at this recently. So on the one hand, you've got conformity is one of the big principles of the current system. Well, if you want conformity, then you need compliance, and that's what the standardized testing movement's about. And this is a business. That's the point. It's a business, and it's really stifling our children at the moment. In 2013, we looked at some of the figures. The National Football League in America, which is not, of course, football.
It is in America.
As we know.
I'm a soccer fan.
Exactly. And we have to call it soccer because they appropriated the word football. That's not right.
Don't tell me you're from Leicester.
What?
You're not from Leicester.
I'm from Liverpool.
Okay.
It's near enough. But it's rugby, isn't it, in armour. So, but the NFL was a $9 billion business in 2013. The US domestic cinema box office in 2013 was an $11 billion business. In the same year, the education, testing and support industry in America was a $16 billion business. It's massive, so it's a business. And that's what's squeezing the life out of our kids. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that governments have taken the view that the way you raise standards is by focusing on the curriculum and on testing. And the opposite is true. The only way you improve education is by focusing on teaching. Because in the end, it's children who are trying to learn. It's students. You're trying to get students to expand and to learn. And that's an expert personal job. As soon as we lose sight of the fact that this is a very personal process of cultivating interest and curiosity and talent and ability and all of those things and an awareness of the world around you, if we lose sight of that and the role of teaching, then we end up in the mess that we're in. But the good news is this can be changed. It is being changed. But I just want to say, too, that a lot of what you talk about, I absolutely, totally agree with. I mean, I agree with most of it. I'm not saying there's some bit I just think is nonsense, but because I haven't heard all of it. But this couldn't be more important.
With a PhD, I expect that.
Exactly. Can't grasp all of it. But it couldn't be more urgent, you see. I mean, one of the figures you quote, and I do too, is that we currently face on Earth challenges which are without precedent in the history of humanity. I mean, on the one hand, you have exponential growth in technology and its impact on culture, on economy, on the way that people live. It's revealed all kinds of possibilities, many of them miraculously good. As you said, there are things we're capable of now we couldn't have even contemplated 50 years ago. The big problem is that our spiritual development seems to be lagging a long way behind our technological capacities. Secondly, the population now is accelerating at a point where, well, we're already the largest generation in the history of humanity. For most of human history, there's nobody around, really. It took a whole of history to get to 1 billion people in 1800. In 1930, it was 2 billion. In 1970, it was 3 billion.
40 years.
Between 1970 and 2000, the population of the Earth doubled from 3 to 6 billion. Right after the Summer of Love, as it turns out. You can't tell me it's a coincidence. And we're now at 7.4 billion, heading for 9 billion by the middle of the century. And we don't know if the Earth can handle it. Actually, we know that it can't. There was a really good program on the BBC a few years ago about how many people can live on Earth. It was called "How Many People Can Live on Earth," and it was presented by David Attenborough. They're very good at titles at the BBC. But they concluded this, that if everybody, because we all need, you've made the same point, Sadhguru, that we all need food, fuel and water to survive, and air to breathe. And
Shelter.
if everybody on the Earth, they concluded, consumed food, fuel and water at the same rate.
Fuel. I'll say shelter, the basic essential: shelter, food and water. Fuel. We don't consume fuel, drink it, but I'm assuming basically cars and stuff to get around. I'm guessing living a normal life, I suppose, in terms of driving around to work, eating food, drinking water.
All 7.5 billion people, at the same rate as the average person in India, the Earth could sustain a maximum population of 15 billion people. So we're halfway there, we're 7.5 billion people. Of course, we don't all consume as they do in India. They said if everybody on the Earth consumed at the same rate as the average person in North America, the Earth could sustain a maximum population of 1.5 billion. And we're 5 times past that. That's on current methods of production and consumption. So we are heading to an abyss here. And if we don't change course, by the middle of the century, we're going to need 4 more planets to make this work. Now, the interesting to me is, as I know it is too, that these problems aren't being caused by the rest of life on Earth, they're being caused by human beings. And it's a problem of consciousness and of creativity. We've created these problems, so we either have to
By reproduction, a lot of people are thinking they're being creative.
What's that?
By reproduction, a lot of people are thinking they're creative.
I mean, they are creative, if you know what I mean. Sadhguru, I get what you mean. But yeah, I don't think it's creativity or lack of intelligence or anything like, well, maybe a lack of intelligence, but obviously there's a way where everyone can have a kid and still not create a problem. Again, if every family, every person only ever has one kid, the population will decrease, because two mother, father have a kid. When those two die, there's only one that replaces the 2 losses. And then whenever this child becomes here, and then the 2 parents have this child, well, now there's 4 that only becomes 2, and these 2 only becomes 1. So everyone's having one child, but it's going down. If they have 2 child, if every parents have 2 child, then these 2 die and they get replaced by their children. When these 2 have children from separate families, these 2 will be replaced by their children as well. So it's a steady population. There's no growth, no decay, but obviously there's death and people giving, twins and stuff, and triplets and quadruplets for some weird. I mean, it's not their choice, obviously, for that, but just, I won't say good luck or bad luck, depends on how you look at it.
Yes, that's right. Well, that's right. People talk about saving the planet. And I think the general conclusion has to be, the planet's going to be fine. The planet's been around for nearly 5 billion years. It'll shake us off like a rash. We tried humanity, not so good. We're going to stick with bacteria. They're fantastic. But it's a serious thing. There's a very good observation by H.G. Wells, the science fiction writer, who said that civilization is a race between education and catastrophe.
Wow.
And there's some truth in that. Education in the sense of, developing our capacities, our awareness, and our understanding of ourselves and of each other and of the world around us. If we don't take seriously these principles, then we're condemning our children to a very, very bleak future. And the idea that all this can be solved through fueling the profits of the testing companies is hard to comprehend, that anybody takes it seriously. It's a case of terminal myopia. And so to me, it's an issue at every level. It's personal, it's about our children, it's about ourselves, it's our communities, but it's about the larger enterprise that humanity is part of. And it really couldn't be more important. And the principles that I know you embody in the schools are exactly the right ones. It seems to me that that's what this is about. But there isn't a single way to do it. As you said, there's no one perfect school, there's no one particular way to do it. Circumstances vary, but there's some principles. It's about conditions, it's about having a holistic view of humanity, of how children's growth and potential, recognizing the power of teaching, and recognize that you need to get these balances right and that we can do it. But it couldn't be more important that we get on and do it.
A lot of it has been articulated by Ken, but what I would like to say is, in terms of my experience of school, I went to school only when it was absolutely necessary. I had very innovative ways of staying away from school. Because right from my childhood, one thing that somehow got stuck in my head was, if someone is saying something which means something to them, however simplistic or stupid it is, I'm willing to pay full attention. But if someone is saying something which doesn't mean a damn thing to him or her, but it's some big stuff, I am not interested in that. Because if you're not interested in that, why should I listen to something that you're not interested in? So essentially, this instruction business comes from this. When you think you need to instruct somebody, you have assumed that those whom you instruct are of a lower intelligence than yourself, which is a serious mistake. There is sufficient scientific data to show everybody, every one of us over 30 years of age are not as intelligent as a 6-year-old child who's just come into the school. There's substantial proof to show that. Only reason why we are looking out to be smart is because we have information and the child does not have information. So we're just showing off this information in the form of instruction. If we bring the teacher training process, completely take away this word and…
Sorry, real quick, I'm gonna rewind that in a way. Only reason why we look… okay, let's go. There's proof that shows that…
substantial proof to show that.
Oh, the 6-year-old child. It's very interesting because there are a lot of, what do you call it, I guess they call it child prodigies out there who are amazing, like violinists, pianists, whatever it may be, singers and stuff. It's really kind of crazy, and I guess this kind of goes to prove the point of what Sadhguru is saying. It's like, I mean, and also what Sir Ken is saying about how just basically children are sponges, and it's really crazy how good, I guess, these students are. Well, these are relative, obviously, but I mean, they play instrument very well, and a lot of people or experts in that field consider them very, you know, like, what do you call them? I don't know. Anyways, they're very good, like exceptionally well, strangely so. But to me, there's always seems to be a cost to that. Where like if they're super good at something, there's always seems to be a cost. Like maybe they have a certain kind of disease, or they have a social issue, or there's just something, and that kind of sucks. But maybe it's like a trade-off or something. I don't know if all of them have that, but I've noticed that in some people. Someone I know, amazing artist, but he just seems very socially awkward.
And the child does not have information. So we're just showing off this information in the form of instruction. If we bring the teacher training process, completely take away this word instruction and bring inspiration and transmission as a way of life for the teachers, every school system could become a fruitful process, whatever the thing, because I don't believe we can transform all the systems around the world. But in some way, if we bring inspiration and ability to transmit whatever really matters to them, then a child would sit up and listen, for sure. As a part of this, in our schools, we made it, our school is a 7-day school. There's no holiday and no weekend. This may be shocking for America because thank God it's Friday is the philosophy. If one knows the joy of learning, I don't say why would they want to take a break. Well, activity needs to be adjusted according to, the child's ability to do things. So in a month we have 4 to 5 activity days which are not determined. It's always a surprise for a child. The child will never know when is the activity day. Today when they come, today could be activity day. Suddenly tomorrow you come again, it's an activity day. Next 15 days it's continuous academic day. But academics are very well woven with arts, music, everything to such a point. I found that when they come to… in India system, I don't know, it's the same here probably, they do first 10 years from first standard to 10th standard, and then there's 11, 12, which is like a pre-university kind of thing. Once they come to 11, 12, they all want to get into professional colleges. In India, you don't get into a professional college unless you have 99.5 percentage. Okay? The Delhi University has the legend of refusing children who got 100 out of 100. Okay? Where are they supposed to go? I don't know. They got 100 and they refused because there's no space for them. So, this Marx madness will catch up and the parents will go on overdrive, and we have spent 10 years bringing art, music, culture into their lives. Everything will be dumped and just mathematics and science is being done whether they like it or they don't like it. So in the last 2 years, I made this 11, 12 into 3 years. I said, it's 3 years, if you want to come, you come, otherwise you leave it. Because we invested so much in art, music, culture, everything. Now the moment you come to 16 years of age, you drop everything and go into professions. You are a doctor who cannot sing, you're a dangerous doctor, believe me. Yes? You're an engineer who doesn't understand the engineering of your own body, that's why you don't dance. If you did know the engineering of your body, very effortlessly you would know how to move. So, we made this into 2 years, into 3 years. So people said, 1 year later my children will go, my neighbor's children are already in engineering and medicine. I said, this is how it is, this is not a race. Education is not a race. 1 year later, what's your problem? You're not in that condition, he has to earn a living at this age. 1 year later he will go more mature and more complete. So we did this, and the amazing thing is, almost 90% of the parents want their children back in the school. 1 year extra for the same education. But we brought many aspects of leadership, management, business which are not in the curriculum, and above all, music, art, theatre in a big way. And it's working out wonderfully for the children, they're coming out much more rounded out. And when the school started, the first question that came was naturally, me being who I am, because education is not my full-time involvement. So people said, so Sadhguru, you're going to give them a spiritual teaching. I said, spiritual teaching is for the stupid who lost life sense. People like you, I said to the parents. People like you who lost the fundamental life sense, you need a spiritual teaching. If you allow human intelligence, if you know how to nurture human intelligence without influencing it, because teachers think they have to influence, parents think they have to influence, religious teachers, of course, they want to influence. Intelligence need not be influenced, it just needs to be inflamed all the time. But everybody wants to influence. This wanting to influence human intelligence comes from…
YouTube. Oh, YouTube influencer, sorry. But whenever saying influence, parents influence, teacher influence, society influence, maybe think of YouTube influencers, TikTok influencers. There's influencers everywhere. Like me, influencer. I'm influencing you right now. I don't know, maybe?
I think in these parts of the world, there is a religious thread in the education system of very strong sense of opposites. Something is God, something is devil, something is heaven, something is hell, something is evil, something is good. This is so strongly set up in people's minds. Naturally, they want to influence because you think they will join the other party. Like how the two political parties in the country look like two religions as far as I'm concerned, the language that's being used on the news channels. In my perception, the political parties look like two different religions to me, because it is such strong opposites. No, that's not what a democracy was about. Democracy means today you could vote for this, tomorrow you could vote for that. As it was necessary, you would shift. No more shifting, people are already clearly identified, this is me, that is you, finished. Maybe the people were telling me only 6% travels. Next 47%, 94% is fixed as two different religions in the country. This is very much present in the education mechanism, that we have strong sense of opposites. This is where I think there is something that education systems in the world can pick up from the East, where we don't have a strong sense of opposites, because our gods are devils also, our devils are gods also. Somebody who looks like this is… what is beautiful, what is ugly, you cannot determine in the East because everything is one big happening. I think if you want to nurture human intelligence, this strong sense of opposites have to go. There is nobody in this room who is 24 hours good or 24 hours bad, isn't it? You can confess with me, it's okay. Yes. Nobody is 24 hours good or 24 hours bad. It's just when you're conscious, you function in a wonderful way, when you're unconscious, you may do something lousy. This happens to every human being. Now, instead of recognizing that fundamental quality of the human being and how to nurture this, because the basis of our intelligence is just this, that we can do this or that. If you were another creature which doesn't have the same level of intelligence as the human being has, a tiger will only do that, we know exactly what he will do. A hyena will only do that, a buffalo will only do that, it's all fixed. A human being can do just about anything. That is where the intelligence comes in, that an active intelligence would choose an unconscious and a kind of conditioned intelligence will tend to do a certain thing. The purpose of education is to decondition the intelligence so that it becomes an active intelligence, adapting to the situations, doing the right thing for the situations in which we exist, not positions that we have already taken. That is the essence of intelligence. But today, in some way, education system is trying to condition the intelligence this way or that way, because I think there is a strong thread of religion in the background. Though it may not be spoken, I see that everywhere there is a strong sense of opposites, very strong opposites which cannot meet.
I wanted to get back to something that you both have said about creativity and curiosity in order to not be too rigid in one way or another. And Sir Ken, you said that curiosity is the engine of achievement. And so I'm wondering what happens to our curiosity as we grow older, and how do we get it back and sustain it? And how do we keep… I mean, you both have different methods for reaching this, but in terms of…
People are blind dating out of curiosity.
That's one reason. What's that?
But in terms of keeping it, if creativity can be valued as literacy is valued, and if curiosity is kind of the fuel to keep us somewhat awake and aware,
Yeah.
how do we hold on to that as they maybe are even out of school and just continue? I mean, our
Right.
children inspire us all the time. We learn from them all the time. But as adult learners, I wonder if you can speak to that.
Well, yeah, I just want to comment, if I may, first on what Sadhguru says about opposites. I think that's absolutely right. You know, the Western rational view is very much that thinking is a process of making distinctions. It's what the whole logic enterprise is about. You know, it's this, it's that, it's fine chopping, seeing differences between things, and making things into categories. I remember writing, you know, the whole, and it's been a brilliant success in all kinds of ways. I'm not saying it's been without its benefits, of course not. We live off the fruits of rationalism all the time. But a really good example to me is this, the whole taxonomic process that developed in the 18th and 19th centuries in the natural world gave us an amazing system of classifying natural things into genus and into species and subspecies. Linnaeus spent a long time figuring out all these different classifications, and if you go to a natural history museum, you see all of this at work. You know, if you go into a natural history museum, you can go into a room, and I've done this, that's got nothing but butterflies in. And it's very impressive. You see all these butterflies in cases against the wall, pinned to the back, dead, but all in species. The big ones at the top, small ones down at the bottom. Go to another room, you see the beetles, not the Beatles, other beetles, all classified. And it's a very interesting way to think about it. It's a way of studying these things. But if you leave the Natural History Museum and go into the countryside, you don't see all the butterflies flying in formation with the big ones at the front and the small ones at the back, and the beetles all in some separate part of the field keeping their own company. In actuality, in life, these things all mixed up with each other. They pollinate the environment that they all depend upon. That's the principle of economy. It's about relationships. It's not about separate categories. And for example, in schools we divide the arts and the sciences. But it's just a device, because in the world, all the scientists I know are deeply affected by aesthetic interests. Look at the work of engineers. I was going to want to ask you later, if we have time, about dance. I'm a big advocate for dance, and in most school systems, dance is out of the picture entirely now, because we need to spend more time on math. And I think dance is as important as math, but it's not separate from it. These things are integrated. You can talk about your liver and your kidneys as separate entities, but they only function together. It's the only way it actually makes sense. If you take your liver out and put it on the table, it's not doing a very good job at that point. Is there something wrong with my liver? Yes, there would be. It's out of your body now. It's about how these things connect that matters so much. So I think the better way is to see that thinking is also about making relationships and making connections, and not seeing separation. So we end up, for example, in school saying, are you an artist or are you a scientist? It's going to be this or it's going to be that. It doesn't have to be a choice. So when I talk about creativity, I often ask people, I ought to get a life ready, but I do ask people how creative they think they are, large groups. And it's interesting to me how many people who are creatives, so to speak, will also say they're not really very smart, or people who think they're intelligent will say they're not very creative. And actually, creativity and intelligence aren't separate. They are functions of the same thing. Creativity is about having fresh ideas, and that's a function of intelligence. So when I say creativity is important as literacy, it's not separate from it. But creativity seems to me to be the hallmark of human intelligence, however we describe it. And there's something prior to it, which is imagination. Imagination is the power to bring into mind things that aren't present. Creativity is putting that to work in some way. But the best evidence of the power of human creativity is that we all create our own lives. Every human life is a unique achievement. There have been 100 billion people, we think, on the planet in the past 150, 200,000 years, and every single life has been different. Every one, because you create your life. Unlike most other creatures. And human beings don't live as other creatures seem to, only in the direct physical world. We live in worlds of ideas and beliefs and values and cultural practices and traditions. And we human beings invented virtual reality long before Oculus. We all live in virtual worlds. It's what the great cultural conflicts are about, when people's conception of the world come into conflict like this. The great religions tearing each other apart over ideas. And cultivating creativity and curiosity seem to me to absolutely be paramount, and it's the starting point of education. You have to help people to see that many things we think are provisional, they're contingent, they can be changed, we can think differently. We don't need to be trapped into our own biography. We can recreate ourselves if we wish to, and that's what, as I understand, a lot of this work is about. It's giving people another sense, another realm of possibilities that they can come to occupy and inhabit. But it begins by enlivening the capacity to ask questions, the sense of intrigue about the world around us. And it's that gets killed in schools when it comes down to direct instruction, testing and multiple choice bubble tests. It's the very thing that should give life to education that we kill off at the bottom.
This is so wonderful.
Okay, actually, I'm gonna pause right there. I don't really have too much to say about the second part. It's very interesting that he kind of compared creativity and intelligence. You could, I guess the way I see it from his perspective, I do see those things as two different things, but again, it's not necessarily, I guess, two beneficial things. You don't have to be intelligent, you don't necessarily have to be creative. It'd be great to have a balance of both, to have both an equal amount of intelligence and an equal amount of creativity. You have the benefits of both worlds. Generally, people who are very, well, I don't know how to measure creativity, but intelligence is a little bit easier in terms of, like education stuff or memory, basically. It's one who's capable of like knowing so much on a topic. The problem with being so intelligent on one topic is you have the hyper focus on that one topic, which then you'll lack on other aspects, creativity, intelligence, and other topics that you're not studying, because most topics to delve into it so deeply, it takes a lot of time and a lot of testing and a lot of studies. And even if you spend your entire lifetime, you will never ever discover everything, because there's always more tests and more studies to be done. But you could also kind of see what he's talking about, creativity and intelligence, as like a branch, like one father figure, and there's two things here, and it branches out, like, I guess, intelligence of memory and then intelligence of creativity. Like, basically what he's saying, he sees it as a different kind of intelligence, which is, I think, in my opinion, a bit more appropriate. And I guess, yeah, it was kind of funny that he says creative people say they're not intelligent and intelligent people are not creative. End of video, by the way. But yeah, and it makes sense, because generally creative people don't, I guess, I'm making an assumption here that, they don't like books, schools, because it's so rigid. It's not very flexible. It's not very creative. Whereas people who like books and studying, they like form, function, linear, things that are predictable and linear, whereas creativity is very just abstract, and there's no form or function to it other than for it to be what it is, what the person who did it to be. So it's not like whenever you draw a line, it's like, okay, for a intelligent person, that's a line from point A to point B. For a creative person, that could be anything between a start of a pen, a bear, or a pencil, or itself as an art, which would not make any sense into an intelligent person. Like, dude, this is a line from point A to point B and nothing else. But if you have someone who's in the middle, he can see all those things. Potentiality of being a point A to point B or a pen depends on how it needs to be interpreted or what's the use for it. Anyway, that's my reaction, my second reaction. We're going to hopefully finish up the next part with 40 minutes. Woo! The ideal education. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.